Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and our guest today is Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
Okay, so the biggest news now is that it seems to me that Iran and the US agreed to peace formula where US will get the enriched uranium stockpile, whatever is controlled now by Iran, and will open Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz, which has already happened. If that's the case, we can really figure out that there will be a lasting peace in that region, at least between the US and Iran. There are a lot of more to it than I just mentioned. There is Hezbollah, there is Lebanon, there is Israel, there is
exactly
maybe even Turkey.
Right. Yeah. This calls for, I would say, cautious optimism. Cautious optimism. Looking good. Things can still go wrong in ways that we might not expect. But yeah, I agree with you. This calls for cautious optimism, which means now, in one sense, we can now turn more of our attention back to Ukraine and how it is absolutely apparently punishing Russia in the current war and continuing their counteroffensive. And other opportunities are opening up where Ukraine could increase its advantage even further. What do you say?
Well, you're well aware of the latest aerial attacks by Russia against Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv and Odessa and all major Ukrainian cities. A lot of people lost their lives. And that, you're absolutely right on the front lines. Russians are absolutely helpless. And it seems to me that Ukraine could do even much more on the front lines than it does. But there are certain reasons why it's not doing that. And this bombardment of Ukrainian cities is definitely one of them. Now, I'll continue. What worries me is that somehow there is a, I don't know if you feel certain linkage between Putin and Trump. Now, what it is, okay, I'm not going to go into all this series about that Trump is...
because we can't read his mind.
Yeah, we can't read his mind.
It would be nice to be able to do that, but only God can read his mind.
Only because even Trump himself doesn't know what he's going to do.
He may be unaware. He may be unaware of what he's actually doing. There is that possibility too.
Yeah. So what it seems to me, what happened is that the order which was established in 1945, the world order, which surprisingly, United States was head and shoulder of that order. Miraculously, and because of that, the United States came into absolutely unreachable heights every which way you look at the economy, the arts, and science, and finances, and just name it. There is
it was absolutely dazzling. Yeah,
where America wouldn't be number one by far. Now, what's happened with Trump about 10 years ago when he started to climb to power, and now when he's at power, even the 4 years that Biden was at the rule, Trump never disappeared anywhere. He was still very active in politics. So we are talking about now at least 12 years of Trump's rule. obvious rule when he was twice president, and a hidden rule when he was still inspiration for Republicans, and many people who feel close to it. So what's happened is that Trump, for whatever reasons which are not clear to me at all, maybe it's clearer to you, he started to demolish this world order which existed, and thanks to United States since 1945. So that order was based on power, but also on Judeo-Christian values. So there were a combination of power and valuables. Uh, the Judeo-Christian way of looking at things, life, philosophy, and many other things. So a combination of two made this unreachable combination of both power and soft power, and just name it. And Trump started to demolish that, where US played the number one role, number one, number two, number three, and number five. US was everything to it. So why would you demolish a system where US, your country, has supreme power and supreme uh, command of everything? Why would you do that? Not clear to me, unless he could foresee that America starts to lose its commanding positions, and therefore it has to either rebuild or change or do something different. Maybe because of the rise of China, maybe some other factors. But that's what I feel. And speaking about Ukraine, because of the success of Trump, both in Venezuela but majorly in Iran, is emboldened Putin to say, okay, I cannot get anything on the front lines because to do that I need the mobilization, and the mobilization will be not very openly met by Russian people. Also, I don't know if he still cares about Russian people or any people at all, actually. So the only thing what I do have power and I can do something. Look at Trump, how he didn't obliterate Iran, but he was getting close to it if the war will continue.
It will take decades for Iran to recover from its current defeat. I would estimate.
Absolutely. So Trump didn't have to bring the troops on Iranian soil to get
Good.
anything. We are talking about front lines. We are talking about tens and hundreds of killed people. Who needs that? You
Yeah.
just use your supremacy in the air, especially ballistics, drones to a certain extent, and you just do whatever Trump did in Iran. You just do the same in Ukraine because the stronger, the bigger power has to prevail. And Trump proved that over and over again. And you idiot couldn't do that. And then why are you even taking yourself so seriously? And you want to get at the table on all kinds of negotiations and conferences and so on. You are nothing. So Putin is actively following Trump's example, except that Trump has certain things in his possession that Putin may not have. So therefore, it's a futile attempt of Putin following Trump's steps. It just doesn't rhyme very well. What do you think, John?
Well, now I agree with you for the most part because one of the things way back, if you look back during Cold War history, remember when Nikita Khrushchev was in power and he did what was called de-Stalinization. He stepped back from the total totalitarian system that Stalin had established, and he relaxed some restrictions on the Russian people and other peoples in the Soviet Union. And yet he still maintained firm control. And Khrushchev apparently believed that socialism could compete successfully with capitalism, but it had, in order to do so, they had to spend less on military power. They had to cut back their military spending. And apparently, the way that he hoped that he could achieve this was when the Soviet Union first tested an intercontinental ballistic missile in 1957. That was an asymmetric response. It got past the United States bomber defenses and so forth, and now the Soviet Union could actually strike the United States. And this, in turn, they had a period of what we call strategic bluffing. Nikita Khrushchev was telling the West, we can turn out ICBMs like sausages, and basically, it's unless you are more cooperative, we'll just produce more. And they thought we had no way of telling how many ICBMs the Soviet Union was producing. But of course, as you know, the U-2 overflights that the CIA was conducting over the Soviet Union, eventually we found out, and they found to realize that when they got the results, that there were not hundreds of ICBMs, they had six ICBMs all above ground. And all of them apparently would take at least a day to prepare to fire them, which meant that, in theory, if we had gone to nuclear war with the Soviet Union, our bomber force could have destroyed their missiles before they could launch them. So anyway, but that's an example of asymmetric response. So Trump, if we take it to the current example, Trump is saying, well, we have all this military supremacy and power, but his advisors say we don't want to overuse it. We don't want to commit too much military power. We want to do just enough to take care of it, so that you can devote your attention to other things. Like, and Ukraine, apparently, they perceive that Ukraine is very much in control of the situation with Russia. So again, we don't have to commit so much military power there either. We start to concentrate more on what matters most to Trump, which is economic recovery, which is trying to deal with the economic situation at home, bring prices down. So so there starts to emerge a strategy here, a pattern, that the Trump administration wants to use just enough military power to neutralize what it considers to be the most dangerous threats, and then concentrate its resources to the more pressing matters at home. This would be similar to the strategy that I had been advocating back in my book, The Russian View of U.S. Strategy, that the United States should strive to be the world's geopolitical balancer, not the world policeman, not the empire, but a balancer. Try to neutralize threats so that the greatest number of nations have the chance to achieve prosperity. Ideally, that is how it should work. In practice, it's a challenge. So therefore, you have to be able to use your intelligence community and your military forces to be able to put your adversaries at a stalemate. In chess, a chess grandmaster is perfectly willing in a tournament to accept a draw against strong opponents. Okay, a draw, I'll take it. If you can't get that great checkmate or that great combination, you can't knock your opponent out, at least you can get a draw. So in this sense, say again?
Next time you'll try to win.
Yeah, next time I'll checkmate your butt. But yeah, and a good chess player is always looking for that great combination that knocks out his opponent with a checkmate. But in any case here, the Trump administration is not trying for checkmate. It's trying for a draw. It's playing for draws, and perfectly happy to do that. It's not trying to conquer. It's trying to stalemate. It's trying to play for draws. And in the belief that in the long run, this works out best. So this is something. It's a fascinating thing to watch. I would argue it's perfectly reasonable to argue that there are ways that the Trump administration, the current administration, could do things better. There's always that. That's the reason we have a democracy, or in our case, a constitutional republic. We do not have a democracy. We never, the founding fathers did not want to establish a democracy. They wanted to, because they feared that the democracies eventually result in rule by the mob, rule what they called the tyranny of the majority. They wanted to avoid that. So they set up this constitutional republic with checks and balances built in, so that in the American point of view, in the constitutional point of view, stalemate, draw is always better. You don't want your government to be able to do things too easily or too quickly. That's why you see this constant fighting, this constant combat between the Congress and the judicial branch and the executive branch. They all check and balance each other. And that is what the founding fathers envisioned would work. It is better to have perpetual stalemate than have one branch triumph and dominate over the other two.
Yes, how it applies to Ukraine, what worries me is that Putin, as I said before, following the Trump's footsteps, he will try to bring Ukraine on the verge of capitulation simply because it could be unbearable if they will continue and increase severely all these bombardments of Ukrainian cities, killing. They're still not killing too many civilians, by the way. Let's hope that it's trend will continue. So, okay, in here, 12 people, 18 people or so, and it's horrible, but
Yes.
not 180 people, it's not 500 people, it's not 2,000 people that
Correct.
very well could be. And I'm afraid if that escalation will continue and the world is looking and watching and doing nothing, including Europe and US and everybody else, how its escalation, horrible escalation of Putin's aerial attacks continues, and if it will go on for yet another few days, I'm not talking about even few weeks or months, that could drastically change the course of the war. That's what I'm afraid. And that's what it will go unchecked. That's what is happening. What do you think?
I would say that I share your concern to a certain extent, in that this pattern represents what Nazi Germany was trying to do after it had realized they were not going to win. Instead, they were against Great Britain, for example. They kept up. Not only did they continue their night bombing against Great Britain because they couldn't do daylight raids, and they also continued. They used their V1s and V2s, their vengeance weapons, the V1 buzz bombs, the V2 rockets, and they kept launching them as long as they possibly could until the Allies finally occupied their V1 and V2 sites. But they kept launching them because they were called Weltungswaffen, vengeance weapons. They just wanted to kill. They were trying to break the morale of the British people any way they could. But of course, you can't surrender to V1s and V2s. You can kill people, but you can make them angry, but you can't. And it did not break the morale of the British people. And instead, the Allies continued their bombing, their combined bombing campaign against Germany, and absolutely punished them and destroyed city after city, and eventually they had to physically go in and defeat them. Now with Russia, it is possible and attainable that if Ukraine, along with support from other countries, continues to degrade Russia's air defenses, its economy, its ability to continue to reduce its ability to wage war to a point where it's insignificant. And Ukraine is showing every sign of continuing its counteroffensive and taking back more and more territory in the east. And I also see signs and reports that Ukraine has managed to reduce the Crimean defenses, particularly around the Kerch Bridge.
Yep.
To where they can at any time in the reasonable near future, the Ukrainian military and political leadership could decide now is the time. We launch the decisive attack. We seal off Crimea, launch a counteroffensive to force the Russian occupiers of Crimea to surrender, because they will no longer have the option to withdraw if we seal off and destroy the Kerch Bridge. Do that and inflict a visible and decisive defeat that is apparent to the entire world, which tells the world the Russians are beaten. They are decisively beaten. And you can then apply, and then the Trump administration could, should it choose to do so, apply diplomatic pressure and economic pressure, saying, look, the pain is only going to get worse unless you decide to make peace. Declare victory and go home. And that I see is what I see as the most likely course for right now. Basically, there's a phrase that I have developed. It's pretty much original to me. I think I've told it to you before. Never take your foot off the neck of a dying cobra, because if you do, Ukraine should keep its foot on Russia's neck until it is either.
John, you know that you mentioned when you compare situation between Britain, Great Britain, and Germany, it was a fight of about, say, equal powers, approximately. But also there was no international community like the United Nations or any other bodies that would oversee somehow and criticize. Although I'm a strong believer in United Nations.
The League of Nations, its predecessor, was effectively useless. Because for one thing, the United States never joined the League of Nations, which could, in theory, have made it more successful, but it didn't work.
Oh, hold on. You say it didn't join. It didn't. In my knowledge, I think it didn't. It failed to ratify because it was a brainchild of Woodrow Wilson.
Right.
So America definitely should have joined, but they didn't ratify. That's a fact.
Yeah.
Okay, and therefore League of Nations was really enough to go very quickly. And I think Soviet Union was kicked out of the League of Nations, and Germany was kicked out. There's nobody left. Eventually, the League of Nations kicked out itself in a way.
So much for collective defense.
That's right. Yeah, but today's situation is very different. There is, first of all, it's a major power or a perceived major power like Russia against Ukraine, so perceived as a lesser power or so on. And there is United Nations, there is NATO, there is all kinds of things that could adjust this situation, but failed really to do it. Now, what worries me another thing is, again, it's you can argue with me on that one, but I think the major enemy of the United States, according to Trump, is not China or Iran or anybody else. It's the European Union. And the weaker, because it's economic power, it could become very quickly military power, especially if Ukraine is a part of it, or so on. And it could become sort of independent entity, at least European theater is concerned. And I don't think that Trump wants to make European Union even more powerful. So if Ukraine will somehow will go away, either Putin will eventually defeat it or Ukraine will agree to some kind of peace or so on, then European Union will lose its strongest army, and therefore the European Union will be toothless against further attacks from Russia and so on. So therefore, the idea of European Union becoming a subject of today's financial, military equation and so on, it will be out, and therefore Trump will feel vindicated that, according to him, European Union or NATO or whoever didn't help him with Iran and so on, whereas, like one thing he says, he doesn't need anybody help. He can do it all by himself, which happened to be true, and that's okay. On the other hand, you say, oh, they failed to help me. I asked them to send them. But NATO is, even the name itself, it's North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So it's North Atlantic. Is Iran in North Atlantic anywhere shape? Probably not. So therefore, it's very unclear even the grounds for asking NATO to help. Maybe some separate countries like UK, maybe you ask UK, help us. Okay, we need your help. So forget about NATO or so on, just country by country. You see, like if you remember coalition of 2000 after 9/11, and then in 2003 Iraq, a lot of countries, including Ukraine, they were helping United States, even if they were not members of NATO, European Union, or any other organization. They were helping. They felt that they must help United States at that time. So it's
because
different for
they saw this as in their self-interest to do so. That they
yeah,
were essentially scoring political points with the United States. They said, "Oh, they helped
yeah,
us,"
true,
and they were hoping
true.
that the favor would be in anticipation that this favor, this diplomatic favor and military favor that they are doing the United States, would be returned in the future. In other words, mutual benefit. So they were
That's
trying
right.
to build up diplomatic strength with the United States. So that is, and we may yet see this process occur with the current Trump administration, because the Trump administration is, without having formulated a clearly stated strategic doctrine or a clearly stated set of rules or a clearly stated set of principles that will govern U.S. behavior for the rest of the 21st century, without having established a clear grand strategy that both political parties could adhere to. And that's a real challenge. That given the current political environment, that is in fact a real challenge. But short of that, we are going to have a series of what I call ad hoc agreements, trying to address the current situation and adjust. And over the period of the next few years, you will see the United States making adjustments to its relationships with the European Union, with NATO, trying to achieve that proper balance. If, again, using my principle or my model of the geopolitical balancer, that is why what I envision the United States eventually becoming during the course of the rest of the 21st century. And while it's kind of like making sausage, Sasha. It's better about making sausage if you don't look too closely at the process.
That's
You don't
right.
want to you don't want to watch that. But
So, Jonathan, I just want to mention, if I'm right, and U.S. itself started to jeopardize the world order when it was supreme leader in all directions, number one, number two, three, four, and five, everywhere, U.S. If Trump and his administration decided to uh, essentially to destroy that world order, it must replace it with something better, something where America will become even stronger than it was before. So, what was that order in the head of Trump? Do you feel that the stronger world order is coming? I don't see it that way, but maybe we have to wait for.
I would one thing I would caution against is, you may remember the the U.S. television series Star Trek.
Yeah,
About Star Trek, the Enterprise. I must point out, in the world of Star Trek, in the 23rd century, the Earth was there was a united Earth government. The future would be that the world would be under one world government. The United States and everybody else in the world would be under one world government, one leader, and supposedly this was going to be a utopia, profitable, all these other wonderful things, which I was and still am very skeptical that such a thing would even be attainable or even desirable. Because if
it's
you have,
against human. It's against human nature. We
you are
know that.
correct. And
Our
Lord Acton,
situation.
you are correct. Lord Acton, British parliamentarian, once stated, "Power corrupts. Absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely." If you had one world leader, no one short. I would trust no one short of Jesus Christ himself ruling the entire world, because short of that one person would become irretrievably evil and corrupt. because all that power, that person would not know what to do, would not know how to act responsibly with that much power. So that is why I would say that in the interim, short of this ideal utopian world government with Christ leading it, I would say the best we can do is adjust in an imperfect world. The best you can achieve is balance. And you have to do that. Settle for the draw. Don't go for the checkmate.
Yeah. Thank you so much, John, for today's program. As we know, the next in line is Cuba. So invasion is being prepared. And I don't know what Russia is going to do about it. Maybe evacuate their stuff very quickly. I think that's the best strategy.
They'll be on the last ship back to Russia, getting out of Cuba.
Yeah, and then they will go on a slow boat to China. So
yep,
the journey is to be continued.
Yep,
Jonathan, thanks a lot. Have a great weekend, and I will see
you do the same.
On Tuesday, same place, same time. All the best. Bye bye, everybody. Slava Ukraini. God bless.
God bless America.
Bye bye.